Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today we are recording a special episode of Profiles in Risk. Special because today I'm not chatting with an Insurtech founder. I am chatting with Andrew Peet, who is a former lecturer at the University of,
Wales, Tony.
Of Wales, at the University of Wales, and an insurance professional. And we're talking about a very special topic of why insurance carriers, insurance organizations in general, should hire people who come from the teaching professor education space. So Andrew, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for asking me on, Tony. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Same here. So basically, this whole thing started, I started looking for teachers in order to make some short videos about, hey, teachers, insurance is a great career. This is how you make the transition. And when I reached out to you to try to get you to be one of those videos, you had the idea of, let's talk about the other side of the coin. Let's talk about why carriers should hire educators. So why are teachers, educators, professors, etc., such good hires for insurance organizations?
Yeah, I think I'd take a little step back, Tony, as well. I mean, if we're talking about educators, I'd take educators at any level. I think when you're looking at the characteristics and the attributes that they have, they're extremely well suited to fit into organizations at any level. Now, that level might be at sort of a customer service type role. So I'm thinking characteristics, attributes, very, very important to have patience in there. Very, very important to be able to explain things incredibly clearly. But then if you're talking about moving onwards and upwards through an organization and actually considering educators in roles, supervisory roles, or management roles, I think there's even more value that can be added. I mean, from my perspective, here's a little story. I was lecturing a corporate strategy course at the University of Wales on a Masters in Management program. And I just knew that a ton of the guys and girls that were in that lecture theatre, there were about 60 odd of them, actually didn't want to be there. So from my point of view, to have 60 or 70 people in there, some of whom who didn't want to be there, you know, they just wanted the extra year, and mom and pop would pay for them to stay on at university. But that's where it was. And under those circumstances, you know, you've got to really be inspirational in what you're doing. And I think a good educator has that quality. They have that ability to inspire, engage, even when, you know, initially someone doesn't want to be there. And I can draw some comparisons to, let's talk about sort of the contact center type operations. I've run a large contact center type operation myself, and it's a real challenge to actually get people on board and get them to want to be there because they want to be there. Do you understand what I mean in that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Here in the States, in the call centers, they're large. They're very large. And the kids in there didn't grow up wanting to work in insurance. And then they graduated, usually with a college degree, and they didn't want to work in a call center. They're in a call center because that's the job that was available. And they're seeing it not as a career. They're seeing it as a job. And they're within all of insurance. Most entry-level people think of this as a temporary job until they find their real career.
Yeah.
And in the contact center, even more.
No, absolutely right. Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, another story is my youngest son, who is now 34. He didn't want to go to college, and he didn't know what he wanted to do. So he actually ended up taking a job in Allianz in the UK, and he was in the post room. So he started in the post room, And he was really lucky to have a series of good, good supervisors, managers, etc., who saw him go through the stage to now, where at 34 he's running a small team of his own, and sees a great future for himself in insurance. And I think if you sort of draw the comparison, you look at the skills you need to do that. I think so often they are lacking. They are lacking is my observation, and I see turnover at ridiculous levels.
So part of it is, I agree completely. I've been giving my presentation on millennials for about 8 years now. And I'm always telling every audience that it is our job to sell the mission of insurance to new employees. It is our job to help them visualize the different areas they can grow into, because they didn't grow up wanting to do this. They have no idea different roles there are. And that it is our job to help them figure out how to grow. And that's, we just don't do it much. And part of the problem is a management problem. Part of the problem is that the supervisors, the managers, etc., they grew up here in the call center or in claims or whatever. They don't understand the bigger picture of insurance and of the company, and they are not measured on their people growing. Right. So somebody leaving the company or growing into underwriting instead of claims or instead of customer service basically counts the same to this manager or the supervisor, because they're measured in just aggregate of their people's numbers. So they just don't have the incentive, and we do need to change that. But I think where you're getting to, and which I agree completely, is that if we had a bunch of teachers, educators, people who thrive on developing people, whether they're being measured on it or not, that's just who they are and what they're trained to do. They are going to be so much better at even if we're not managing even if we're not rewarding them for helping people grow, and even if we're not penalizing them for when people don't grow, they're going to do it by nature.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, a good educator is looking for opportunities to coach. They're looking for opportunities to develop people. But I think alongside that, they've got the skills to actually communicate effectively, as well, and to be concise and to be clear and to be direct. You know, I find that, you know, people in education are not frightened about having what I call a fierce conversation. They can tell it how it is. They're used to telling it how it is, particularly when you've got issues. You know, when I look at education generally, I mean, certainly from the point of view of high school, I think behaviour is one of the challenges. And again, I draw some similarities to if you're looking at a large operation, and we both mentioned contact centres, but the level of maturity in those operations is sometimes mixed at best, and often lacking. So once again, I think someone with the right background has the capability to deal with that, and to deal with it in such a way that it doesn't diminish that person's self-esteem. They look at it as opportunities to grow the person. And I think that's why I thought when you put that note out, I thought that, yeah, that's absolute, you know, spot on in terms of an observation of the type of people you need to get, and the sort of skills that they need to be in those scenarios, those situations.
So if I understood your last comment correctly, okay, so people get to young adulthood, and some people grow up faster than others. So some people mature very fast, and they just kill it in uni, in college, and they graduate, and they go to big jobs. And other equally intelligent people just mature slower. I very much count myself in that group. And we graduate, uni or college, and with little idea what we're doing with their lives. And it might be 2, 3, 4, 5 years later when we start really developing into solid professionals, having a a manager, a supervisor that recognizes the potential and that encourages us to grow, and that gives us the tools to grow, and that recognize our learning style, et cetera, can be the
Very important.
catalyst for a
Yeah,
fantastic long-term professional.
yeah. I mean, that's very important. I think from the point of view of development as well. So someone coming from a teaching background is used to planning people's development. They're used to setting targets in terms of development, understanding how important it is to achieve those targets along the way. And I think from that sort of situation, again, very important to move that into the workplace, because I think so often there's an awful lot of lip service paid to development plans,
Uh,
and also the delivery of those development plans. And I think there's an awful lot of lip service in some instances paid to actually having regular conversations with people about their development, about their behaviours, and what they need to do to move along to the next level. And there are some organisations that are very good, and I'd certainly count Allianz in that from personal experience. And there are others that are not quite so good, and that's not confined to smaller carriers. That's across the board.
yeah, I would 100% I agree with that. I've seen um, companies that absolutely thrive on helping people grow. They tend to be smaller and medium-sized carriers here in the States. And I've also seen organizations that talk a good game, but especially at the bottom levels, yeah, everybody needs a development plan, and everybody needs to be investing in their continuous improvement and stuff. But
Yeah.
don't you spend any time away from the phones? In fact, I have a story. So my co-founder at Insurance Nerds, Carly, I spent a year in the call center at Farm Bureau of Iowa, and then I moved over to a different company, and Kylie was at this company, and she was in the call center when I met her, and super promising, super smart. Very quickly after I met her, started working on her CPCU and her MBA, finished both.
Wow.
Um, and I recommended to Carly that it made a lot of sense to join Toastmasters, because she was a lot better with data and details than I was, but didn't have my confidence in my public speaking. So I recommend that she join Toastmasters, and there happened to be a Toastmasters group that meets right in the office. However, the office has two large buildings that are right next to each other in Des Moines, Iowa, and on the same street. And a lot of the professional level jobs are at 1100, and a lot of the call center type jobs are at 1200. Yeah, so she worked at 1200, and uh, basically the Toastmasters group met at 11 a.m. every Tuesday, and it was an hour-long meeting. And on top of that, it would take her maybe 10 minutes to walk from 1200 to 1100 for the meeting. Well, she couldn't get permission to. Basically, uh, her lunch was theoretically 45 minutes, and they were not willing to bend on that for her development after she had already invested
Astonishing.
in herself, right?
That's
Because
that's astonishing to
yeah,
hear that. I mean,
mind blowing, and they
yeah,
lost her, of course.
it
And
absolutely is. And under those circumstances, there should be time allocated for people to develop the way they want to develop. So as well as structured learning that you would expect to have in the workplace, so necessary skills, necessary product knowledge, etc. You've also got to give people that freedom to actually do some stuff for themselves, to develop themselves, And there's no doubt the example that you provided was a great example of someone wanting to do that, and it would have been in the interest of the organization to allow them to do it.
They had
So,
already paid for her CPCU, and they were in the process of paying for her MBA, and they were unwilling to give her 15 minutes at lunch. And I believe you are frozen. Just waiting on you to come back. Let's hope I remember. My internet died. I'm back.
I just turned around. I was suspicious that it might have been my internet, because that's been dying
So
regularly today.
What I was saying was that so they were paying for they were paying for her CPCU, they were paying for her MBA, not letting her take 15 minutes extra at lunch.
Yeah, that's just crazy. I mean, that tells you, potentially tells you two things. It tells you a little bit about the organization. It may well tell you a little bit about the line manager.
And that's exactly the problem. And that's the problem. I can't tell you how often I give career advice to people and I tell them to do CPCU. And they come back a week later and they're like, I talked to my manager. My manager doesn't think it's valuable, and my company doesn't want to pay for it, right? And or the company wants to pay for it, but my manager doesn't think it's valuable. Why does that happen?
That's a tremendous qualification.
Yeah, and that happens because they're in claims or in the call center, and their manager grew up in that call center. So the only thing that supervisor, that manager knows how to do, the only thing they value is the phone getting answered quickly and getting you off the phone quickly.
Yeah, that's so short-sighted. I mean,
it's so short-sighted.
It is. I spoke at a CPCU event a couple of years back down in Kansas, and it was really evident to me, talking to people, the value of that qualification is immense. And it's not just from the point of view of, the technical stuff that's in there. It's just the industry information that is gleaned. It's the network that you build. It's the camaraderie that you create across the events that you attend. Absolutely invaluable. And it's, if you're recommending it, I mean, it's the best thing you can be recommending for people to do. Tremendous.
Yeah. And if you talk to the CEO of the company, chances are the CEO would be like, of course I want them to do it. But there's a middle management problem where and it's not even, it's more like lower, it's like frontline management doesn't understand the value. The company is doing something wrong that's leading to them not understanding the value.
That's really interesting. I mean, that could be a whole another conversation.
Yeah,
but that's where you're talking about organizations that are at best disconnected, but at worst they're dysfunctional. So the disconnected organization is where each level doesn't really know what's happening at the other level. They think that their desires from a senior level are being delivered throughout the organization, but because it's disconnected, that communication is not happening. And the dysfunctional organization, well, I can leave that to your imagination. But those are the organizations which will see massive degrees of turnover.
So we talked about the advantage of educators in customer service, in as first line managers. I'm curious on what about at the executive levels? Have you ran into executives who come from the education space who are now in insurance, and what about education has helped them in their executive level careers?
I mean, that's a great question, and without giving that a great deal of thought, and I will do, and come back to you, I can't bring to mind anyone who is in an executive type of role who has come through an education background. I can think of examples from when I did my MBA. There were a number of professors at the business school who had their own sort of business interests, and some of them were occupying senior roles in a non-exec capacity in organizations, and bringing with them not just their wealth of technical knowledge, subject matter expertise, etc., but also their capability to manage what can be often with boards difficult groups of people with strong opinions. Yeah,
That is a
they're absolute experts at doing that. They use that combination of their subject matter expertise, their expertise in terms of communication, and knowledge, etc., to actually control those groups. Yes, it's astonishing if you sit in board meetings, and I'm sure you have, how the characters, the individuals, can really leave the meeting, and you wonder what was all that about.
That's a very good point. I bet I'm gonna have to do some looking to see who I know that's C-level that had an education background before their insurance career. But yes, I bet that that every CEO staff would benefit from an education person helping better communicate, better manage the board relationship.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
I think without doubt, and for the reason that I said, you get lots of very strong personalities on a board, generally speaking. Occasionally you don't. Occasionally you'll get sort of the more technical folk on a board, and there are two things that are very important there. One is to make sure you've got the balance within that type of environment. Make sure everyone says what they need to say, and to make sure that it's totally inclusive in terms of the environment. I think that's the other thing that educators are pretty good at, is making sure no one is left out. So important. So yeah, encourage the quiet to speak, and control the ones that generally have too much to say.
Cool. Yes, control the tonings, while at
No,
the
not
same time encouraging the quiet ones to actually say what they're thinking.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I think that's another very valid and valuable skill that educators bring to the piece.
Andrew, it's been a pleasure. Running out of time here, and my apologies for the slight technical issues. But I look forward to keep collaborating on this topic.
Yeah, I'd like to investigate a little further, and as a matter of fact, I've reached out to one of my old professors to talk on that very topic. So there's actually, believe it or not, I actually think there's a book there somewhere.
I 100% believe it, and Insurance Nerds would love to publish that.
That's right. Well, I'm going to be talking to Graham, and we're going to have that conversation. It could be, if you're interested, we'll loop you into the conversation as well.
Yes, no, I definitely am. Definitely am. So keep me posted. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, and thanks for allowing an old man to ramble on.
I very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.